Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Sean, for your excellent presentation. I'm very conscious that as the last speaker of the day, I'm following many very interesting and thought-provoking talks. So there's no pressure there, is there? And on top of that, I do apologise that I think there may be a little bit of repetition here and there, so apologies in advance. I was tasked with talking about pre-purchase clinics, the business case and practicalities. That's actually quite a tough subject to cover. And I decided to approach it from a combination of different ways, and you'll see as we go through. So it's a commonly held belief that bonded clients are good for veterinary practices, from the perspective of clinical satisfaction for veterinary staff, as well as that of the financial health of the business. There seems to be no clear definition of what a bonded client is, but there are plenty of references in publications giving advice on good management or business skills for the veterinary profession. And here, Alan Robinson of Vet Dynamics lists what he considers the benefits. Importantly, their pets are likely to have better health and welfare, and bonded clients are great ambassadors for their veterinary practice. So bonded clients can be gained at any stage of pet ownership, but the process begins with the first visit to the vet practice, and this is often with a new pet. And they come with that expectation that the vet will pronounce it fit and healthy, which may result in that first consultation being a slightly anxious one, with the potential to negatively impact the experience. Would this anxiety be relieved if the client already felt comfortable visiting the practice, if there was already a good relationship between them and the staff? And surely that's a yes, and pre-purchase consultations provide the ideal opportunity to develop this. However, as Sean's already alluded, pre-purchase consultations don't seem to be commonplace in practices. So why is it? Is it that practices don't offer them, or that the uptake by potential new owners is poor? I suspect that many practices are quite prepared to see new owners. A quick straw poll of 20 or so colleagues of mine suggested that this was the case. Sean's just mentioned some figures as well, and mentioned the recent introduction of pre-purchase consultations by IVC. Obviously, there are practical considerations as far as the how. The PDSA Which Pet toolkit has a useful guide for the veterinary team, which might provide a good starting point. The practicalities of time and space will be specific for individual practices. But again, as Sean has already suggested, all of those that I asked agreed that they would be offered free of charge, feeling that charging would be likely to put people off coming. So whilst this is obviously a generalisation, the suggestion is that veterinary practices do recognise the potential benefits of seeking to achieve early client engagement. As to the question of who within the team would provide these pre-purchase consultations, for me, I think the answer would classically seem to be that this is a role that RVNs are ideally placed to fill. Considering the current workforce issues affecting the veterinary profession, there's increased pressure on veterinary surgeons' time, which means it may not make sense to fill appointment slots that could be used for situations that a vet must handle with complementary pre-purchase consultations. However, amongst the ambitions and recommendations in the VN Futures report are the aims to provide structured and rewarding career paths and to maximise nurses' potential. Developing a consulting nurse-type role fits these nicely, and with appropriate training, RVNs should be able to be regular points of contact for our patients and their owners, offering advice and treatment. And pre-purchase consultations are perfect examples of how practices can support both potential clients and their nursing teams with positive benefits all round. Of course, additionally, there are the marketing considerations, and promotion of these is likely to include things like social media, Facebook, Twitter, the practice website, potentially physically advertising the appointments at the premises, perhaps in the window, maybe adverts in local papers. But there is another angle to this. How do we easily reach those people who are not only not yet customers, but also not yet pet owners? And particularly, how do you encourage these people to consider a veterinary practice somewhere to go for advice of this type? Over the years, I have experience of working with clients who brought their new pet for a checkup, where my clinical examination revealed problems, and the animal has turned out either not to be as fit and healthy as they had presumed, a very different age from what they'd been told, or quite patently not the breed they expected. I'm sure I'm not alone in this. And I imagine many of you will have had similar experiences and remember the often difficult conversations that were necessary, as well as the owner's disappointment, anxiety and upset. Several of such clients expressed regret that they hadn't thought to come to the practice to talk to us before they got their pet. Others were surprised when I suggested that we would have been very happy to have seen them in advance, as it were. But unfortunately, their perception was that we would be far too busy and they would be wasting our time. And sadly, I think the public consider veterinary practices only as places to go once you have a pet, that we offer A&E type services for sick animals, as well as preventative health care such as neutering and vaccinations. Why come to a vet for advice about getting a pet? So I put exactly that question into Google, where to go for advice about getting a new pet. These are the first 10 that were on that first page, and there was only one veterinary business there, Vets for Pets, down at the bottom. That had a link to puppy advice, but whilst this mentioned about vaccinations and other preventative health care, it was all aimed at people once they'd already got their puppy. And when I clicked through the other 9 links, interestingly, it was only the blog on the Time for Paws website that mentioned involving a vet at all, and again only after you'd got your dog. Number 10 on the list of things to do, after all the general advice about collecting, feeding, training, etc., was register with a vet. Particularly disappointingly, the BVA didn't even suggest visiting a veterinary practice ahead of time for advice, although the website did signpost to the PDSA Which Pet toolkit, as well as to Dogs Trust and the Blue Cross. So it would appear, therefore, that even if we are, as a profession, offering this service, we're absolutely not marketing it very well, and that will no doubt affect these pre-purchase consultation uptake. But is there something else? I decided to see what the most common Google searches around vets might be. I put the words vets are into the search bar and let Google autofill the rest. And the result's just a little bit worrying, isn't it, really? I mean, we're considered doctors, but sadly most of the things are really negative. Scams, rip-offs, expensive, even crooks. I mean, I have no idea how representative this is, and I really would like to feel that the vast majority of my clients don't think like this. But it would have been so much nicer to have seen words like caring, kind, understanding, approachable, or even helpful. A similar search of vets are good for revealed nothing, amongst other things. And Vets Offer came up with the following. But nowhere in any of these searches is there any mention of help or advice. Why may the public perception of the profession be less positive than it would have been nice to have seen? And I wonder if this does have something to do with the way that we communicate, both with our clients and generally. The difficulty is that animal owners typically seek the input of veterinary surgeons, either when their animal requires regular preventative health care or because it's unwell, when they feel they need professional help. And in both situations, it's easy for vets, perceiving their role to be one of an expert, to be directive and aim to provide advice or solutions. We are a profession that probably considers ourselves problem solvers, which may result in a tendency to feel the need to tell the clients what to do, which might not be a good thing. We've just heard from Alison Bard, and last year her research article, The Future of Veterinary Communication, Partnership or Persuasion, commented that the language used by vets in relation to the way they respond to farmers during consultations tends to be paternalistic and directive. And there's been other research about the area of vet-client communication. In 2008, Jason Coe et al. From the Ontario Veterinary College, University of Guelph, published a special report in JAVMA. And the results showed that pet owners very much wanted to be part of the consultation procedure. And amongst themes identified, those relating to general communication styles included that pet owners expected veterinarians to be respectful of their decisions. They expected a partnership in the care of their pets, and they expected their veterinarians to listen. In discussion, Coe et al. Noted that the move away from a paternalistic style has had benefits in human medicine. Last year, my practice was one that took part in a research project being undertaken by Louise Cora at the University of Nottingham as part of her PhD into veterinary consultations. Louise's work isn't completed yet, but she presented 2 abstracts at the International Conference on Communication in Veterinary Medicine this year, which suggested that relationship-centred communication is appreciated by clients and has a positive impact. So it would seem that our clients very much expect us to work with them in a collaborative way, rather than being dictatorial or overly persuasive. although unfortunately, as Alison has found, the very nature of our role predisposes to this type of approach. And particularly unfortunate is the possibility that because of the need to provide information, a lot of our public-facing communication may come across not only like this, but could also appear judgmental. The recent campaign about the health issues experienced by brachycephalic animals, obviously it's important that we provide education and improve welfare, but sadly this type of thing may inadvertently drive current and future owners away from veterinary practices for fear of being viewed negatively. We heard earlier about influencing human behavioural change, and Suzanne Rogers, co-director of Human Behaviour Change for Animals, talks about the need to consider the science of human behaviour change when hoping to influence attitudes. Trying to change people's minds in a confrontational manner doesn't work. Instead, we need to use empathy and provide a positive message. There will always be some people who will want certain breeds of animal, and their decision may not be based solely on how it looks or how trendy it is. They may genuinely have researched it and decided for all sorts of reasons that the particular breed they plan to get is the best fit for their circumstances. If our reputation as a profession was one of open, collaborative engagement, I imagine the potential purchasers of pugs or French bulldogs, for example, might be more likely to consider a pre-purchase consultation, where perhaps rather than criticising, vets accepted and respected their decision and looked at ways of helping them to find a pet with the greatest chance of being healthy. And of course, in those consultations, we could talk to them about insurance, be that good or bad. The Vet Futures project called for a change in veterinary consultation style away from a hierarchical model, with the vet as the expert, to one centred on partnership. And this would seem to be important in the context that we're discussing today. On a personal level, for me, one of the best aspects of my job is the relationship I have with both my clients and their animals. Having worked in the same place for long enough, it's very rewarding to find myself being the first person the pet meets on its first visit, the only signature on the vaccination card, and then at the end of its life being there to support both it and its owners when the time comes to say goodbye. And of course, if instead of customers with whom we have business arrangements, we as vets have clients with whom we have relationships based on mutual respect, the trust that's built from this helps us to have those difficult conversations about welfare when necessary. And as an aside, there's just been published by the Vet Record this week a really interesting paper on ethical decision-making, helping to provide a tool that may well be useful in practice to help these conversations. So, in summary, I would suggest that veterinary practices are in the main customer service businesses, and perhaps we should reconsider our business models. Perhaps we should aim for an all-round, more holistic well-being type approach based on open, collaborative and relationship-centred communication. Such a shift will require the enhancement of customer service and client-focused communication skills amongst all our staff, but especially amongst vets and nurses. But it would potentially change the public face of the veterinary profession and allow veterinary practices to appear more welcoming. And in that way, perhaps they'll become the go-to places for help and support before you even get a pet, which should lead to increased uptake in pre-purchase consultations, which should itself be good for both veterinary businesses, their staff, and animal welfare. To my mind, a no-brainer, win-win situation.